Welcome to the Change Your POV podcast. You're listening to Headspace and Timing, a show dedicated to breaking down the stereotypes of veteran mental health. I'm your host, Dwayne France. Let's get ready to make sure that your headspace and timing set correctly. Hey everybody, welcome to Headspace and Timing. If this is your first time listening, then thanks for checking us out. As many of you who serve know, the M2 machine gun, the 50 cal, is one of the greatest weapons in the military's arsenal. If the weapon's headspace and timing isn't set right, however, it's just a huge chunk of metal. Veterans can be rendered inoperable if their headspace and timing's not set correctly either. That's my mission here, to raise awareness about veteran mental health and reduce the stigma against seeking support. Each week we'll talk about different aspects of veteran mental health and interview mental health professionals that are working with veterans, service members, and their families around the country. All right, hey folks, welcome back to the Headspace and Timing Show. My name's Dwayne France, and I'm your host. Got a pretty special show for you today. This is going to be a little interesting. This is about to get a little bit real because I have someone coming on to talk about something that's pretty important, but it's also somebody that I know personally. This is where the two parts of my lives kind of merge and mash in together. So I would like to introduce my friend, my compadre, my battle buddy, Mr. Bryan Alexander. Bryan, good morning. How are things going?
Hey, morning to you, France/Dwayne. Things are going well. I'm very honored that you would, seek me out, and especially after the blog, which I guess we'll get into a little bit later. Good morning.
Absolutely. Good deal. So, how about you, before we get into the Stripes Tell Us story, how about you tell the audience a little bit about you? Maybe not so much about me, but you can sneak some of that in there if you want.
Yeah. So I joined the Army with all intents to do the short 3 to 4 year stint, move on out, and well, that obviously didn't happen. Life happened. Met my beautiful bride, Angel Alexander, and we have a beautiful son, Talon. Of course, things came with a cost. I stayed in, and I'm currently at 15 years. I've moved between Fort Carson, which is where I met Dwayne. I've been in the 82nd, the 173rd. I spent 3 years in Washington, D.C. on staff. Definitely when I decided I wasn't going to raise my right hand again, I did it several times. So.
Right. So you were at Bragg. Bragg was your first duty station, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so you were at Bragg for a while. You deployed with them. When was that?
So I was in Fort Bragg from, late 2001 on into 2008, early 2008, when I came back from the 15-monther.
Yeah, so you were you came to us in between our 15-month tour in Iraq and then that first time in Afghanistan. I was trying to think this morning of sort of the moment that we met or whatever, But I was a platoon sergeant. You were a staff sergeant. One thing I do remember was we were just starting to build the platoon back up from being reconstituted after everybody leaving, and I think we had reflagged. They had brought me back up to the company to kind of do some reconstitution. And I remember, I think there was a point where you and Sergeant Major Parks were standing behind our formation, and he was talking to you, and I was afraid that he was going to be stealing you away from our platoon. And immediately after you left, I went up to him, and I'm like, Sergeant Major, I need this guy. I can't do. The war's going to be lost without him. Do not take him from me. And he didn't, which was cool. That was good.
Yeah, I think to add to that, Sergeant Major walked me from the battalion headquarters all the way to Alpha Company, talking to me, and he said, "Oh, I see you're a senior rated jump master. Well, let me tell you, I have a high expectation for you, blase, blase, blase." And then I get in there, and you're sitting in the first sergeant's office, and I see another senior rated jump master, and whether that's a connection piece or not, people looked at us differently, especially because of our MOSs, and that we had kind of stepped out to do greater things, challenging things, and you can't screw up when you're up there. So, but anyways, yeah, it was a funny moment to say the least.
Yeah, that's right. So that was, and I think because we were battling with, we were almost sitting at reception trying to grab people as they came out to make sure. And so you were part of a really great crew, a good crew. I couldn't have. And I know I speak for Blake Howard, the LT, that we wouldn't have been nearly as successful if it wasn't for you and Jamie Grant and Erica Miranda and the sections and the times that the people.
By the way, I seen a picture of Blake and all his kiddos, and life has gone on there in Hawaii, and I couldn't. I was smiling and I cried at the same time because I often wonder where our folks are at, and
he's doing well. I'm sure he's got his he's taking people to the gun show. He's doing that whole thing like he likes to do. So, but yeah, he's I've mentioned him a couple times in the podcast here, so I may have to have him on at one time. But yeah, so you and I deployed to Afghanistan, RC East, for a few good times in the mountains. We kicked it there a little bit with the folks.
Yeah.
And then I left. You stayed. You went to 173rd. I went to another. So there was a period of, we come together and then we separate. Mm-hmm. Then you and I. Of course, we stayed in contact, and we were in D.C. last year. The family and I, we came out because obviously my wife and Angel are friends as well, and Talon and the kids.
Yeah.
So I had come out to D.C., and it's one of these things about hey, folks, we're getting to the point of whole veteran mental health here. Everybody's like, what is this? Why am I listening to these two just freaking jack around? Veteran mental health does have something to do with it, because the big thing is the connection to those people that we served with. It's sort of like an enduring bond. There's a story I don't think I told you, Brian, but it was really going through my my mind. When I was a teenager, my aunt and uncle lived right next door to my grandmother, and it was a big family. We hung out all the time, and I was over at my aunt and uncle's house. My Uncle Cliff retired from the Army as a CW4, and wow. He was sitting on the porch with this guy. Little short guy, little, round face, old ponytail, gray hair. And man, they were talking like they were, best friends, right? And I said, I asked, I think my Aunt Karen, I was like, who's that guy? I've never seen him before, because we're, again, big family and everybody knows each other. And she was like, yeah, that's one of your uncle's Army buddies. And I'm like, do they hang out often or whatever? And she was like, no, they haven't seen each other in like 12 years. But yet, when you sit on the porch and you connect with somebody like that, and it's almost as if you pick up and you don't lose any time. And I think that a lot of veterans who are listening to this can absolutely relate to that, and I think that was really what was going on in my mind, because I don't think we'd seen each other for probably about 5 or 6 years when I came out to DC last year.
At least. So. Going to that, sometimes we don't know what we say, how we say it, how it's going to be interpreted. But who cares? We're veterans. Yeah. Sometimes we just need to say it, and it takes courage to do that. And it takes courage to ask for help, or, anything we do. So I think, our moment on that porch that day, sun setting, you and me just reminiscing of our times in Afghanistan, and let's just say 150 movements, at least 30 ticks, whether they were long or small, and for those who don't know that are listening, ticks is troops in contact. So
yeah, it was a little chippy, right? It was
got a little sporty.
A little sporty. That's right. It was just a little bit of action.
So as we began to talk, and you took my words, and then you put your spin on it as well from your memory of things, and I think, the blog was fantastic. I remember reading it. I actually brought it out the other day and read it to my son, and there was a portion of it I couldn't get through. I was pretty messed up, but, that's part of healing. And I think when you're a veteran, you have to recognize that healing is a lifelong process, dependent on the exposure and dependent on the person. We don't often want to admit our weaknesses, especially us men. So
yeah, no, I mean, and that's true, and that's the big thing we're trying to do here is just kind of break down the stigma and change the way people think about this stuff. But so we keep talking about this blog and the article on the Headspace and Timing blog that I wanted to bring out. And what I've been doing here with the podcast has been maybe I'll interview a clinical mental health professional. I've had some veterans on talking about their own mental health journey. Then other times I would talk about like posts that I wrote that maybe were pertinent, and I'll link to this post in the show notes. But as I came across, and this is one that I had sort of scheduled. Then I was like, it's really based on something that you had said, and so I figured it would be great for you to come on and we talk about it. So this is going to be like a whole franchise. This is going to be like the story behind the blog. The Stripes tell the story, but not the whole story. So it was an offhand comment that you made, and it was a story that you told that sort of struck me and kind of put this in my mind. So just put it in context. This is actually, I think I mentioned it to you. This is the second most read. Well, this is the most viewed blog article on the website. The second most overall. The other one's an infographic. But this is, every time I share it, I mean, I've had Canadian soldiers, British soldiers are really and of course veterans. Everybody says this really resonates with them. The meaning and the statement that you said, and so it's always one that's sort of a crowd favorite, and it talks about the stripes on our uniform, and so the stripes, of course, we call them overseas service bars because the Army loves to be euphemistic, right? You and I weren't truck drivers, although we drove. Well, we didn't always drive trucks, but we were motor transport operators, right? And so the Army likes to play with words, but of course we call them combat stripes. And
very true.
And for those of you who don't know, the combat stripes are hash marks, sort of what is it, on the right hand, the right arm of the dress uniform, and each combat stripe represents 6 months of overseas service. And for, you had your 15-month in Iraq, I had my 15 months, so that would have been, like 2.5 really, but it all accumulates.
Right.
And
definitely adds up.
So, and I think that I went with mine, and I had a 15-month combat tour, a 12-month, and a 9-month combat tour, and that's 6 stripes. But that's not just 6 stripes, that's like, years of being deployed to combat.
Definitely.
So that's sort of the premise behind the stripes. There's a story behind the stripes, but then that's not the whole story. And so I'd like to hear the story, or I'd like for you to tell the audience that the moment when you walked into the civilians and that whole thing. You were dressed up in your salad suit, and so give us some of that. Give us a backstory.
Yeah, for the civilian sector, I had all my flair for the military, all branches. I was in my best dress. I believe I was about to attend a graduation where I worked at, and they came in and they were like, "Whoa, what does all this mean on each arm?" And so I told them, it was my time in service, and then I got into the overseas stripes. But here recently, and I say recently as of 2010, 11, whatever, we, and maybe I shouldn't stereotype everyone, but several of the service members began to call them combat stripes. But I told them very quickly that it wasn't a time that was represented by each stripe. It was a time that was represented between them. And the reason that is because everybody wants to give you kudos as a soldier when you go off to war and when you return home safely. And if you don't return home safely, we're still bringing you home. But, the point is that there is a healing process that doesn't really occur. I'd say that because, we are constantly in training, constantly. Right. And this was, for a lack of better terms, this is when we had 4 brigade combat teams. Fast forward, we've gone back to 3. Things have downsided, people have shifted, but I'm talking at the height of the war, we were constantly in cycle. And for those who are listening, you totally understand this. There was there was no breathing room.
No, there wasn't. When you were talking about the space between the stripes, we're talking about those times between the deployments, and that we call it high operational tempo and something like that. And this is what I tell people is that from 2006, when I landed on ground here in Fort Carson, all the way up until 2013, there was not one full calendar year that I was home for the full year. Some of that was included in the 15-month tour, the 12-month tour in Afghanistan. But even in 2008, which quote-unquote should have been a downtime, a full year where I was home because we didn't deploy again until 2009, the Army in its infinite wisdom decided to send me back out on recruiting duty for 3 months over the summer of 2008. So I still had, and it was whatever it was called, wasted, but it was still time. That time between our deployments were taken up by so much time that we didn't have time to wind down. Is that sort of what you were getting at as far as in-betweens?
Yeah, and I don't want to insult, the military or insult, anyone out there, but I'm just going to say it like it is from a veteran standpoint. Like I said earlier, that's what we do. And we were literally putting Band-Aids and just stopping the hemorrhaging for the time being. And, unfortunately, a lot made it to the golden hour, but you can only put so many Band-Aids on a leaky hose.
Right. And that's something that even being in combat, that was sort of easy, right? We figured out, we knew what was going on. We knew, we didn't have to worry about eating, right? We had chow every morning. Me, Jamie, and Blake would always, meet up and go chow, but so we had our routine, and then we knew what we were doing. So in some instances, and this is going to be a little strange for those who maybe never deployed, but the combat was easier than coming home maybe and figuring. Did you experience that?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if I could say this, but I knew where the best toilet was for the bigger fobs, and I knew the chow hours. I knew if I came in late on some of my other deployments, if they were going to have late hours. Because the Army runs on its stomach. Let me just say that for the Army folks. And I knew when the best time was to go to the MWR to make a phone call, one phone call, and that phone call was so important for my family, I remember when we were down for 36 hours, we were pinned down, and nobody knew. FRG was getting weird information, and you and I and the rest of the convoy and the team, we had to straighten it all out, and figure it back out. But yeah, no, definitely when I came back from what I think is somewhat controlled, because that's what we do when we go to combat. We try to control the situation from an offensive or defensive posture. And when you come back to this place called society, America, you are one of everybody. You know, there is no occupying by force, rather, you know. And so it's definitely an adjustment piece. And like I said earlier, you know, when you're not here so long, maybe a year, that's not really too long to adjust before you go back somewhere else. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you know, you can't engage to modify the home front operational environment, right? You know, it's because it's a matter of, you know, that it's going to be just a matter of time before you're taken out, and you know, and that's hard, right? That shift between what we experienced while we were deployed and then the shift when we came back. You know, we couldn't we could no longer, and I'd say it pretty often. There were no such thing as stop signs in Afghanistan, right? We didn't. I think there was a stoplight near the soccer ball right there in JBAB, but we didn't really pay attention to it, so it wasn't something that we really. I mean, and you know, we joke and we laugh, but it was all about operational security and things like that. Is you know, things didn't apply to us there, and now we have to make that shift to apply to us here.
Exactly.
And
deliberate and swift movements.
Yeah. And some are able to make that shift pretty easily, and others don't make that shift. But other times, when you try to make that shift from one place, you know, from knowing that you have to make that shift, you're going back to Afghanistan, you know, in 12, 14 months, or back to Iraq, and so psychologically, it was kind of hard. But it was hard.
Yes.
It was hard on the family too, right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, and we hear about it all the time for the younger generation out there. You know, you come home and you're gonna take back over the bills, and you're just gonna fit right in, and everything's gonna be okay. But hey, wrong. You know, if you're married, you know, your significant other has been doing things a certain way, and they have lived a certain way, and they understand. I remember a short story when a salesman came to my house to try to sell me some super good meat, and I said, "Well, I can't do that, sir. I'm not obligated. I mean, obligated is the wrong word, but I'm not allowed to do that." And he said, "Aren't you the man of the house?" And I said, "You have no idea what I do." And she is the one who pays the bills, okay? Because I'm here today and I am gone tomorrow. And he was so confused, you know,
yeah,
so confused.
I'm not even going to be here to eat half of this steak.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
I'm not even going to...
Get off my porch. Leave me some meat, you know. But it is what it is. I mean, you try to explain this to people who just live life day to day, you know. They're just trying to make ends meet. And they just don't understand. And, you know, that was that time of that whole, like I said, the height of the war. I think now we've got a lot of folks coming home. There's still a lot of things going on out there. But, yeah, some folks are very confused by it. You know.
You had a period of time where, quote unquote, a break, I guess. You were in 173rd in Afghanistan after our deployment.
Yeah.
You were... when did you go to Afghanistan with 173rd?
So I would have been there. I left Fort Carson in, let's see, got there in 8, 9, 10, 11. So late 11, early 2012. I went there without my family, actually.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking, because I was in Kabul at the time on a MIT team, and I think we were in theater at the same time. But you were obviously back in where you were at, and then I didn't get out of the capital. So I had waved well time, of course, you know, because that's what we do, and was back in Afghanistan. I think 9 or 10 months after we had redeployed from 4-4 here in Carson. But then you were whisked out of 173rd and into the battleground D.C., right? So you had you were sort of watching the war, kind of. You had you weren't deployed in you were in D.C. for 3 years. So what was that like, going from sort of 90 miles an hour to a totally different full stop in the capital region?
So, I mean, two dimensions here, personal and professional. Personally, it was hard. I was trying to understand things. I'd been a trigger puller, for less of better terms, and now I'm not doing that. I had been fighting bad guys off, and now I'm fighting bad guys off in a different way.
Trigger puller to a pencil pusher.
Yes, something like this. So instead of using so much of my physical stuff, I was using more of my mental aspect of who I am to make things go. And surrounded by very intelligent people there, which gave me a total different view of life and life in the military. And so that was good. I was very humbled. From a personal standpoint, it was difficult because with me not being able to understand this whole somebody just came off the accelerator and slammed on the air brakes, there was this kind of dimension where, oh, you're Angel. Oh, you're Talon. Wait a minute, Talon, you've really gotten taller. Oh, wife, so there was this slowdown where I was just so confused, really confused.
Yeah, and that's something that we talk about in the blog there. That space, kind of before and after the stripes. We were one type of individual before we went into the thing that produced the stripes, and then we became something different after. It changed us. I know, and how much you want to talk about it, but you got a TBI, right? You had,
I was
injury,
blown up twice. Yeah, as you talked about. Fortunately, I was able. I had my legs, my arms, everything was still intact. Unfortunately, there was some things that came along with that couldn't be seen, and that's why I always say, we talk about this thing between the stripes. Well, sometimes there's those things seen that you can't see. That fabric that doesn't matter, right? That's what you said, I think, in the blog, was something that those bits of things, but unfortunately they do matter. They matter to me.
They're like tiny, I think it was a tiny scraps of cloth or whatever, but the weight of them, right? And it's not, as you're talking, I'm thinking it's not just the space between the stripes, but the space between our ears, right? Because that's where a lot of that stuff is happening. So as we're going through those stripes and sort of climbing that ladder of the combat stripes going up our arm, then we come out the other side for whatever reason. Obviously, I retired. I came here and I did one little stint with 10th Group to North Africa. Then after that, I hung up the old jump boots and kind of didn't deploy. And so there's a space after the stripes. And you kind of went through that as you actually hadn't deployed since you came back from 173rd, just because of the nature of the units and the things you're doing, even though you're still active duty now.
Yeah.
So that's an adjustment in trying to get used to the new you. I hear a lot of veterans often say, "I wish I could go back to my 17-year-old self."
Yeah.
Do you want to do that?
I'll be 39 in a month, and though that's not old, my body's starting to feel a few things, and I'm thankful that I'm here. There were days where I wasn't so sure. I was trying to figure things out, and I don't mean suicidal. I just mean that I was really confused. I had seen a lot, done a lot. And there are guys out there, guys and gals, who have seen more than me. So I find a lot of pleasure in my work now. It's sometimes a thankless job, as I do a lot of the future planning for my organization and help facilitate the guys to get training. But when that training happens, that packet makes it all the way to the approving authority, and the funding is there, and the training happens. There's a smile on my face because I know one thing. I may have given them that one bullet to win the war or to save their life. And, that's kind of... So the whole 17, I was dumb.
That's exactly what I said. I don't want to go back and be that moron. He didn't know anything, right? He couldn't get a girl, and he just was just not that I could get a girl. Now I've got one. She's not, but yeah, that's everybody says, or maybe if this wouldn't have happened, and I would have had, living on some alternative reality. That may be great for the comics to have Universe 1 and Universe 2, but that's not our reality. But you said something there, Bryan, that the finding joy or finding pleasure in what you're doing now. That's hugely important to kind of calm down that space after the stripes. You're still in the military, so you have the kind of the purpose and the meaning. But I think you had said even while you were in D.C., you were like, what am I doing here? I'm supposed to be somewhere else. You had to shift your purpose a little bit when you were there sort of in the mixing bowl.
Exactly. I think I will direct this towards one of my sergeant majors here recently came online and introduced me to a book, Starting With Why. Mm-hmm. And I started reading this book after leaders development, forum, for lack of better words. And, one of the things in the book I took away from was there was an American auto industry, and there was this, foreign auto industry. And the American auto industry went over there to look at the foreign auto industry's assembly line. And the problem lied in that same car, exact same door, but the American auto industry couldn't figure out why they couldn't get this door to properly fit. And so they come to the end of the foreign auto industry's assembly line, and they didn't do something that the Americans did. And the American auto industry folks were like, well, why didn't you do that? Why don't you have that last quality control check before it comes off? And the foreign industry said, well, that's because we ensure the engineering is done correctly at the beginning. And I tell you all that to say, sometimes we can have the best plans in our life, where we're going to go, how we're going to get there. But when we hit that wall, we have to understand one thing. Why? Why did we get here? And whether it be the conflicts that we've seen, why am I sitting in front of a TV crying right now? It's a Hallmark movie. It's Christmas. I should be happy.
Right. It's a freaking puppy commercial. What's going on?
It's the Muppets. Why aren't I laughing?
Right.
And that's okay. That's healing. And now where we are, where I'm at in all this, I say that time between the stripes has increased, and I'm getting more time to kind of heal and figure things out, so that if I do in my latter years have to move forward, I'm gonna be ready for it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, that not a lot of our brothers and sisters, of course, not just soldiers, but throughout all the service, they really don't think about that time after the service, right? There's this fog. Everybody, it's sort of theoretical. We know that we're going to get out of the military one day, but it doesn't seem real. We don't believe it, obviously, and it's not something that actually is going to happen. It's you get out when you retire or when I retired. I got another 40 years, God willing, right? It's a whole nother lifetime.
Heck yeah.
I'm going to be a veteran twice as long as I was a soldier. And for many of the young men and women, they're going to be a veteran, 7 times as long maybe as they're going to be a soldier.
Right.
So preparing for the space after the stripes, so to speak, the time after the service, and getting that sort of set so that you can have stability, that's pretty important.
Exactly. And I will just say this real quick. We are to heavily armored vehicles from Iraq 2003, where we were putting sandbags in the floorboards. We are moving and changing, and that's across the fighting forces. And I hope, like you said early on, the stigma begins to be removed and people come online, and if they need help, they get it first. Because I used to tell my guys, head to toe, in and out. That's 360 soldier concept. We cannot move you forward if you're not as good on the inside as you are on the outside, or vice versa. So the Army, and just speaking of that, because that's where I'm at, is going to slow down. The Marines are going to slow down. Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force. It's not going to slow down.
Yeah, you're right.
There will always be a bully.
I was shocked, man. I was, it was August 1st, 2014 was my first day not in uniform in 22 years. And I went back to Fort Carson, just check it out, right? And you know what? They still had formation, right? Like the flag went up, the flag went without me, right?
Yeah.
The Army kept going.
Exactly.
And I'm like, what the heck? And all joking aside, but it's really a kind of like the Army's going to keep going. The military's going to keep going, and it kept going after pops and uncles came back from Vietnam, and it's going to keep going after the brothers and sisters come back from the war zones right now. And so
exactly,
yeah.
And
what is it? The Army keeps rolling along. Is that the
yeah? And you just put me on a topic that I was thinking about, that we were sitting in DC, and that was, I think I remember telling you how confused I was when I realized you were gone. I realized my first sergeant was gone. I realized my friends that I had served countless hours with in combat they had moved on. I mean, they weren't dead, but they had moved on. And I was left there on an island, And I think that one hit me the most because, I thought back when I was at my early coming back from deployments, when I was in the 80 Deuce, and looking down the line and realizing there were no familiar faces, just new people to train. And it was confusing, scary, and, as a leader, we're kind of trained not to show fear. But yeah, exactly. I was like, what the heck just happened, And that's
that adaptability. You're right. That's and that brings back, because obviously, yes, I think as after we came back from block leave and we all just split, and I went over and took over Golf Company as a first sergeant, and Eldon went with me, and and so we all just sort of scattered to the winds. It's like high school graduation, right? Only after bullets and but it is. I mean, and it's one of those things that people PCS, and it's all or shift around, and then we have our own missions, right? So we dig in. Yeah. But first sergeant and the commander took off, and it was, and so we and that kind of adaptability, it takes a big shift, especially when it's the brotherhood and the sisterhood and the people that we served with while we were deployed. Obviously,
you guys were my security blanket. I didn't suck my thumb, but well, I knew I was okay. And
right, because you reach out and you're just like, it's that sense of comfort and familiarity that comes with trusting and knowing and understanding.
Hey, exactly, and that's what I was going to say, is that what that taught me years later was that we surround ourselves with people we trust, or people that we can build rapport with, and that can help move the ball past the 50-yard line, kind of concept. And it began to hone my ability to see attributes and characters in people, and know when things were wrong. Look, man, things are a little off for you. How can I help you? So, but it's a good thing, making new friends. School starts every year.
Army brats are Army brats.
Yeah.
So you, I guess it was a little line that you said, something about the space thing. You told me that story about how the civilians were just like, the civilians you worked with didn't understand. Then I went back to my hotel, and actually this was a post that wasn't scheduled. This was written just before Memorial Day, 2016, and I actually had a Memorial Day post where me and Connie and the kids had gone down to the memorials, literally the memorials, and spent some time at the World War II and Vietnam and Korean War Memorial. And so I had this whole planned post, right, that I wrote, and it was all this major construction. Then this one was just kind of a throwaway. And then I sent it to you because, and I sent you the email, said, you're inspirational because you did inspire me to write this. And then you sent it out, like you blew up my, because I went the next, I was like, what's happening here? Because like you sent it to a couple people. What was the reaction from right after that to people that you had sent it to after you had read it?
Well said, well written, very, very on point. They were taken back, And I said, well, I didn't write it. I'm not that wordy. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But my point was, I said, I kind of gave them the backstory and told them, a dear friend of mine, a leader I looked up to, still do. And I said he kind of took some of his thoughts and some things I had thrown out there, and then that's kind of where we went. And I think when they read it, they weren't really expecting what they read. And I think, and I feel, in my opinion, that it made them think about similar things in their own life, whether professional or personal, So that's kind of where I'm going with that.
And I think that's this for a lot of people, the feedback I've gotten is it helps them generate the awareness. They said that it had put in words thoughts that they had been thinking, but they hadn't been able to articulate. I've heard people that have taken this and sent it to somebody, sent it to their spouse or whatever, and it helped them have a conversation. There's actually another post that's sort of because I do some work for another online community. But then there was the other side of the stripes, the spouses and the families. They have a different experience of those stripes, those combat stripes. That front side, the glory side with all the yellow little stitching, that looks nice. But then the back side's all sticky and crappy, and our families experience the deployments in a much different way. And so that's what I've gotten back from this, is it's really helped start conversations about what it's really like.
Yeah, that sticky, crappy side, it's not always pretty, but it's what holds them together. And, definitely. I called a dear friend of mine the other day, and I told him I was going to be doing this, and, I would send him the link to the blog, and he said, oh, that's awesome. I can't wait. And he said, in closing with him, I said, I guess the biggest thing, you and I, and this whole thing happening, it's like Dr. Seuss, throwing that one starfish back. Can't save them all, but man, if I can save that one, and that's kind of where I really like this, is that I found myself very alone sometimes, and wife confused, son trying to figure out things, and so 20 times better than we ever were on a personal take, but it took a lot of work. It took as much work as it does to get guys overseas and bring them home, and if we put that kind of emphasis on trying to regain that relationship with our significant other, that's a plus. So I'll leave you with that one.
Great thoughts, man. So, sort of in closing, you hear a lot, and we talked a lot to our Joes, and I think this is a benefit that you and me and Jamie and Miranda and even, Fajardo and for the team, we had a parallel element where two platoons ran the same mission, and even attachments, with our medics and our boy, Sergeant Blake with the mechanics there, a little bit of sporty element, but we had all that, but we also made sure at that point to really talk to our Joes and look them face to face and say, look, this isn't a video game. This isn't Call of Duty. What you're doing is real life. What you're doing is actual, that dude literally did just die. There's no reset on this kind of thing.
No.
So what would you say to a soldier or a veteran who says, forget that crap, man. I'm not going to go talk to a shrink. I'm not going to go, talk to anybody. They want to. What would you say to somebody who says, screw talking about mental health?
I think, for simplicity's sake, I would say it's time for an azimuth check. Is north still true north or magnetic north? Yeah. When I was in the 173rd, I ran into our guys. When I was redeploying back to come to DC, I ran into some of our guys from our old platoon, the Wakefields, a few of the other guys, and I'll tell you, regardless whether you're retired or you're still in, you owe it to yourself, to your family, to the rest of the military. You owe it to them to get right. But like I said, most importantly, yourself. Because if you can't fix self, you can't help anybody else out. And so stop being selfish. It's time to get yourself right so that you can help somebody else out who isn't right. Another veteran, another somebody who's on their face, And so, that's kind of where I would go with that. I don't mean to be so heavy, but it is what it is, It's time to man up, woman up, whatever.
No, it's good. I'd say that's a mic drop, but the mics are kind of expensive, so I don't want to drop the mic too much. But so good deal, man. Hey, I really appreciate you coming on. We didn't embarrass each other with some of the really embarrassing stories. You want to throw a story out there? Tell the audience a story about me. Something that's just gonna not too embarrassing. Give me something mid-level, a story. I don't know.
So, as you can see, my man's got a little less hair than he used to. And if you can't, he's bald. So we're sitting in our hooch. And it's October time frame, and we get some presents, and one of our guys gets a wig, and it happens to be some long black hair. And I remember I have the picture. Some friends put that on his head, and he looked like something out of the 1970s. And we were rolling, we were laughing so hard. So that was one story.
I think that you got to give me that picture. Maybe we'll throw that in the show notes there. And
oh yeah,
what it looks like. We'll put that picture right next to Boxer Boy, and and then be able.
I should tell that story.
You want to tell? But go ahead and tell. It's so we're telling all that. This is the kind of this is for the audience. Maybe if you had deployed. We don't talk about the firefights and stuff. We talk about the my buddy Jeff Adamek, one of the other hosts. He calls it jackassery. So this is straight jackassery. So give us a little bit of finish it off with Boxer Boy.
So we were held up halfway through our objective, and we were held down due to intel. It was a really crappy day night, and we had a couple vehicles go down. And so guys were trying to get vehicles repaired, and anyways, well, we have local nationals, like you could turn your laundry in and they would wash your laundry. Well, apparently they washed my laundry extra special because I got, instead of having like large boxers, I got small, medium boxers back. And I happened to have packed one of those pair in my bag, and that's all I had. So I put them on, and it was horrible. There was like no breathing room. Anyways, my guys were really down. It was shitty. So I literally had a pair of boxers on, my combat boots, and a PT belt across my chest as we wear it in the military because you want to be safe when you're about to.
Full safety.
Yes,
yep.
Safety first. And so I was teaching them how to do stretches in this attire.
And the towel. Don't forget the towel.
Yes,
you had the towel.
And a towel.
Yeah.
Yes. Because I didn't want to offend anybody.
Yeah.
And long story short, my name Boxer Boy was born, and everybody was in tears with laughter because of how ridiculous I looked and what I was doing. So, but that's what we do for morale.
Yeah.
We do craziness.
We do insanity. All right, brother. Hey, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. I think it's really going to be beneficial for a lot of people, not even just to understand a little bit of the story behind the blog, but to hear that the message that, you know, don't wait too long. Don't wait till you're at stage 4 crisis mode before you reach out for help. Let's get something done.
Exactly. We're not making wine. We're saving lives.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, folks, that's the wrap for this episode. Thank you for taking a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, with long hair platoon sergeant and Boxer Boy here, and we look forward to hearing you next week. Feel free to reach out to us either at changeyourpov.com or at veteranmentalhealth.com, or you'll see the show notes. We definitely like to have a conversation about veteran mental health. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you next week.
Take care.